These shoes are basically mini treadmills for your feet, and I think they're going to change the way we move around in virtual reality. These shoes are from a company called FreeAim, and I got my first demo of them while I was at a conference recently. I also met the team behind FreeAim and even found out that Alex, their CTO and lead software engineer, lives rather close to me. And despite me punching him in the head during our demo,
Oh, sorry. Did I just punch you? I'm sorry.
he was kind enough to let me into his home so I could have some more time with them. I will be showing clips of our demo here alongside a Q&A session I did with Alex to learn more about the FreeAim shoes and what the future of VR could look like. Let's check it out. I'm with Alex, who I previously met at the AWE conference. He is the software engineer for FreeAim, who are making these absolutely ridiculous VR walking shoes that I was able to demo at AWE. Alex was nice enough. We actually found out when we were talking to each other that we don't live too far from each other. So I was able to get a private demo here in his basement today. The alpha version of these shoes is what we're holding right now, and soon there's going to be a beta version out. But let's just talk a little bit about how this alpha version works. As you can see, you kind of have these treads here. Do you want to give maybe a little bit of an explanation about how they work and kind of what they do when someone's walking in them?
Yeah, so these are shoes that are like little treadmills on your feet, basically. You walk forward and the shoes negate your motion. So you can walk as much as you want in VR and you don't hit an actual wall. They have rotating drive modules on the bottom, so like this, where they can rotate. And that makes it so that as you're walking around, the shoes can move you sideways a little bit, or move you side to side. So if you drift a little bit from your center, they can correct that, or you can do a little bit of sideways motion and that sort of thing. Then we can do some other fun stuff with rotating drive modules as well.
What I've seen so far is you have a phone app to help tweak settings like speed and smoothing kind of. And then there's also an app already for SteamVR, which is what we're using when we play games on Steam using these. Maybe talk a little bit about some of the adjustments you can make with like the phone or the SteamVR app.
Like you said, we have the mobile app. The mobile app currently has more functionality in it, but I'm working on adding all that functionality to the SteamVR menu too. You can adjust how fast the shoes go. So if you only want the speed to be a walking pace or pretty slow because you're a beginner, then you can set it so that the max speed of the shoes is, say, 75 or 50% or whatever. And then there's other settings like how fast they stop. So if you want to kind of be more of a gradual stop, you can do that. Or if you want to be more of a quicker stop, you can do that. There's other settings like if you walk with your toes pointed slightly out, then you can default these drive modules to be pointed slightly out so that you can walk straight, but your toes are out a little bit, that sort of thing. There's settings to maybe make the motion, like as you're walking, a little bit more smooth or a little bit more responsive. If you're changing your walking speed a lot, you might want to be a little more responsive. If you kind of you're going to walk in sim, or you just kind of want to stroll along, you might want to be a little bit more smooth.
And I think that all those settings are incredibly important because as we were testing it out here in AWE, obviously everyone has a different way that they walk or a different speed that they walk. And also the games are different with how the movement works. Having all that kind of adjustability is just huge because that's just how you can tailor any game and tailor the shoes for any person to play any game so that it feels right when you're walking in it.
We'll be working on like a tutorial that a person goes through, and part of that we want to have eventually is like auto tuning all of those settings, that sort of thing. That's all on the mobile app. For the SteamVR menu, the SteamVR menu currently has more of the like in-game settings. So if you want to change your in-game speed, you do it there. And I'm going to add that to the mobile app too, in case you want that there. And then like the hip-based movement versus the head-based movements. If you want to walk forward, but you want to turn your head like this, but you want to keep walking forward, you can set the shoes to do that. Or if you just want to go in the direction that you're facing, you can do that as well.
Yeah, and that feels really good, especially when you're playing shooting games or any game where you're actually interacting with NPCs or other players. You want to be able to move while looking around without it moving your character. So that felt really good in our demo today as well. When we talk about these being the alpha model, you were telling me that there is a beta model that you guys are working on and getting pretty close to here. So let's talk a little bit about some of the improvements or differences between the alpha model and then the beta model coming up.
The beta model, we've kind of revamped the rotating drive modules a little bit so they're smaller. And they have different motors that are a bit quieter. The shoes should be a little bit less noisy, but it's also like a lower pitch too, so it sounds even quieter. At the top here, this is where your foot goes in. We're going to be making this material out of something more like silicone to make it easier to clean. The silicone-like material will be a bit more comfortable. Different straps so that it's easier to tighten for different feet sizes and that sort of thing. There are a few other things, like we're going to have some more sensors in the shoes so that we can do more stuff. In the software, we'll do that.
Pressure sensors, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. There's some changes to the battery too to make it a bit smarter.
That's awesome. And battery life, it sounds like, is around 2 hours.
Yeah.
So depending on what you're playing, what Alex and I were talking about earlier today was battery life is typically on average around 2 hours, and it just depends on the type of game you're playing. So if it's a game that requires a lot of movement, the battery drains a little faster, and if it's not, then it can go a bit longer. But I think officially you kind of want to say around 2 hours average battery life.
Yeah, and it depends on the person's weight as well.
Yeah.
If you don't weigh very much, they might last a lot longer.
I suppose they don't have to work as hard. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, for reference, I weigh around 170 pounds. They lasted for me in 2 hours when I was walking around in Arizona sunshine, Arizona sunshine 2, almost constantly. And then red matter, since I'm stopping all the time, in that game, they lasted, I think I stopped at 3.5 hours, but they could have gone longer than that.
Quite a bit of range depending on which type of game you're playing. Something that would be pretty important to, I know folks that watch my kind of stuff, is obviously when can we actually use these as consumers to play games at home. It sounds like maybe even by next year you guys will have some things started for having a consumer model out that people will be able to maybe see more pages on or information on, but more of an official announcement that you'll be moving to a consumer market with these.
Yeah, our target is to start selling to consumers next year. It might change a bit, but we're hoping that we can start taking either pre-orders or maybe do a crowdfunding campaign or something like that, maybe towards the middle of the year, and then start fulfilling orders more towards maybe the end of the year. But we might be able to move that up. We'll see.
No, that's awesome. I mean, that's got me so excited. And obviously, I think everything gets taken with a grain of salt because you never know what you're going to run into, especially when you get it trying to like really produce these things. That's much sooner than I was thinking that this would happen. I think it's going to be so awesome seeing some of the improvements that come out for these. For the demo that I did today, we wanted to do this in a more enclosed environment just since I had the opportunity to be able to head over to Alex's here. Today, I will say, I mean, it was incredibly consistent. It just takes you that little bit of startup time to get used to it. In a lot of the clips, you're going to see that I'm using the gate that they have around you. And that does help when you're getting started just so that you feel balanced. But in games that we were playing after, I would say, a few minutes, I started feeling like I could just walk upright. We played Compound, we played Red Matter, and then we kind of ended things off with Contractor Showdown, which is a much more fast-paced game. And I think that was an interesting progression. You probably want to start off with these, right, in like slower-paced games just so you get used to it. Obviously, just like with VR treadmills and things like that, if you're playing a more fast-paced competitive type game where you need to be running around a lot, like something like Contractor Showdown, it is going to take a lot more of an adjustment. But I had an incredible time playing that, and I think the more time you have with it, the better you feel. We got clips of you using it, and you just look like you can just get going on it. So he looks much better than me still on it, but I do feel like I'm getting the hang of them.
Give you a couple hours, and a couple hours or I don't know, a week at most or something, and you probably look as good as I do.
I do have some questions that I posed in my Discord community. One that we got from Dev Blogs here is, what surfaces will it work on and which are best?
They work best on a hard or semi-hard surface. Here we have concrete, but I have like a very thin a millimeter or two piece of vinyl on it. So yeah, concrete or vinyl could work. Ashley in his office has a bit thicker vinyl. His floor is a little bit more squishy, but they work just fine on that. For carpet, if you have very thin ply carpet, they should work. They won't work as good as on a harder floor. We're either going to provide like options for people, like a floor mat that people can have. We'll like direct them to where they can buy a floor mat like off the shelf to use with the VR shoes.
Kind of just recommend some materials they could use and things like that. But yeah, obviously carpet would probably just be the least ideal. So it makes sense that you want something a little bit more rigid. We got a couple questions from Bixel in the Discord here. One question is, are these going to be expanded to standalone, or are they only going to be PC VR? So obviously PC VR works now. Is standalone even a thought yet, or would that be kind of down the road?
We're working on standalone. We did actually have a call with Meta this last week. I can't go into details, but we're working on it. We really want standalone because there's so many people on standalone. Even without Meta, there are some options that we have, like reaching out to developers to integrate an SDK that we make. But like I said, we're talking with Meta, and hopefully we can get full support and that sort of thing.
Well, that's awesome. I mean, just the fact that you're already kind of working on that, I think is great. Like sometimes I've seen with companies, it's almost the opposite. Like PCVR is easier to start with or work with, so they kind of focus on that. The fact that you guys are already working on standalone is absolutely awesome. The second question from Bixel is, do you have a ballpark price that you are looking at?
For the consumer version, we're thinking around $1,000, maybe more, maybe less, maybe a little more, maybe a little less. We're trying to be conservative with the price, and that's to start off with. So we're a small startup, but that's the price that we think is sustainable for our business. But as we scale up, as we get more economies of scale and get the manufacturing going more, we do think we can drop the price. We want to drop the price down, so we'll keep working on it.
We got another couple questions from Neo in the Discord. Are the shoes one size fits most, or are there going to be different sizes?
One size fits most. You'll notice there's like this knob on the back here. And if you turn, like I have the knob turned all the way clockwise, but if you turn it counterclockwise, you'll notice that the binding start like sliding back.
Oh, for bigger feet.
Yeah, for bigger feet that we're working on. The next version has smaller drive modules. Maybe we can shrink the shoe down a little bit if we want. On top of that, you'll notice inside the binding, there's this Velcro material here. So we have heel inserts for smaller feet. There's inserts like this that you can put in the shoe to push the foot forward a little bit. And I mentioned we're changing the straps on the beta version a bit so that the straps, they'll kind of be more stretchy. They can stretch around bigger feet, but then they'll shrink for smaller feet and that sort of thing.
Okay.
I have size 10.5 US male feet. My wife, who's used them, she has size 7 US female, and with the heel insert, and she uses them fine.
So you got a bit of range there.
Yeah.
And the next question, so we kind of answered some of this, right? There's a bit of modularity with, kind of, you can have an insert for the heel, but Neo's asking, are the shoes modular? So for example, can you change the soles out? Can the motors be adjusted? If something breaks, can it be fixed easily?
Ashley specifically designed it to be modular so that internally we can swap out parts and try new things. So it is built to be modular. We have talked before about maybe a future version where you can just kind of like unclip the drive module and then put a new one on or something like that.
And that makes more sense for consumers. I've seen it, like you don't want consumers, especially with something like this, you don't want them doing too much modular stuff because then there could be some safety concerns with that.
Yeah, it'd be really cool if people could mod these. But yeah, you're right. We have to think about the liability and risk and all that.
I do have a list of questions here from Bad Bill, and these are our last list of questions here. I think you're probably the perfect guy to answer these, so we'll see how many you can answer. Bill likes to ask some very specific questions. So how much additional lag measured in milliseconds do these shoes introduce when synced with a VR headset? Do you know an exact answer for that? That's a pretty specific question, but
I don't know an exact answer to that. Like it lag visually or between the movement?
I think it's between the movement. And so if I can answer it just from someone who's been testing it out now, like you don't really feel lag. I would say when you have to start walking, like there's a little bit of a learning curve where you kind of have to lift your feet up and maybe kick your heel back a little bit for the motors to start up. But once you're moving, in game versus what I'm doing in real life, I don't feel any additional lag, like nothing noticeable.
I normally play on the laptop here, and playing No Man's Sky, I'm kind of pushing it.
Yeah.
But as I walk, I don't notice like the shoes stuttering or like kind of lagging. I don't notice the shoes lagging even when I'm playing, even when like the game itself is lagging a bit. And we do have safety features, so there are like timeouts and that sort of thing in case you disconnect or the connection is unstable and that sort of thing.
That makes sense. Bad Bill's all about the lag with some of these questions. So how does the system handle potential lag spikes? Are there any built-in features to compensate for sudden increase in latency?
Yeah, we monitor how quickly messages go back and forth and that sort of thing to see if something bad is happening. We do monitor for disconnects. So if the shoe just completely disconnects, then they turn off. And like the shoes communicate with each other too. So if one is like, I think we should turn off, the other's like, okay, we'll turn off. We have safety checks for weird states, like if both shoes are lifted up.
Yeah, someone starts to float.
Yeah, someone floats. They're like, okay, something's wrong, so we're going to turn the motors off. And I mentioned too briefly, like some people, maybe they stop with their heels slightly up, so we have checks around that too, versus like the heels completely down. You think walking is this simple, natural thing that everybody does, but when you really look into walking...
A lot of subtleties, right?
Yeah, there's lots of subtleties.
It's a perfect segue. The next question you kind of started answering for Bill here, it's what safety features are incorporated. So like he's saying, even in the new design of these, there's going to be an additional pressure sensor in the middle. But, so because they are tracking all of these different nuances and subtleties with how the foot works when you're walking, there are some safety features where, like he's saying, if both feet, come off the ground somehow, or if it senses that something weird's going on, where these might not be operating the way that they're supposed to, or the person's not doing something that they're supposed to, it kind of has a safety feature around that. I do also like that you are working on and kind of offering physical safety feature with that. What do you call the safety? Like a safety cage is kind of what I think in my head, but
We call them frames.
oh yeah,
So,
so like a safety
that
frame.
one we call a hex frame because it's like a hexagon. Then the other one, swivel caster frame. We need a better name for these frames. So if you guys have better names
In the
then let us
comments,
know.
if you have good names for the safety cage, safety frame, anything like that, let us know.
Yeah.
This is more my question then. So when it comes to the hex frame, are those things that you're selling those additionally, or are you planning on those coming with the shoes?
Right now, so like the $1,000 I talked about before, that's
That'll be with the frame.
with the frame and probably with like a floor mat too.
The next question will be, how are the shoes charged? I do know that we have this battery compartment in the back here. So they get plugged into there, and then when you need to charge them, you just unplug them. But maybe you can explain a little bit about what type of batteries and what type of charger they use.
Yeah, right now they're LiPo batteries, and we're using this type of charger right now. But the beta version, I mentioned we're making the battery smarter. We're going to have something more typical of an end user product where you just plug in a cord and it plugs into the wall. You don't need a separate charger and that sort of thing. Right now, an external charger like that, but we're working on kind of integrating all that more.
So the consumer version likely will have a more integrated battery system. Right?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, but still swappable. We still want the batteries to be swappable. So if you really want to play for 6 hours, you can swap the batteries out every couple hours and and give your eyes a break every couple hours and then swap the batteries out while you do it.
Yeah, I mean, and there's always people out there that are going to do that. So that is a good call on keeping them hot swappable. Another one from Bill. What do you envision for the future of VR and wearable technology like these shoes? So maybe, I mean, this can be more of a personal question too. Like I know, I'm so into VR locomotion just because I got into VR. I liked the physicality of it. Growing up, you play games and you're always kind of like, oh, I wish I was the character. I want to be in the game doing this. And that's kind of what these things give you, is that sense of being in the game. We can talk about theoretical future state of something like these. What do you imagine the deep future of these could look like?
Short term, where you'll see in the demos stuff like this is the worst they'll ever be. So, and they already work. So we're working on making them more intuitive for people who walk differently. That's what I see in the short term. I mentioned machine learning, that sort of thing. Medium term, I don't know, just being able to do really, really quick movements. I don't know, jump around and do complete side strafing and that sort of thing. Just now you're not even knowing that you're wearing them, and like it predicting all your movements super accurately. I personally think they already feel natural, but yeah, just getting closer and closer to where it's seamless. I want to do the Ready Player One scene where he's on the Infinideck, but I want to do it with I want to be able to do it with VR shoes.
Yeah, well, the Infinideck's so impractical, right? I mean, I think the actual Infinideck code is like a ton. It weighs a ton, and it's very heavy and it's very loud, which is a very cool thing. But yeah, if you miniaturize it and put it on each foot, then you got some really cool applications there. I thought that was really cool with the way that these currently kind of handle your VR environment, right? So everyone, when you're in VR, you calibrate and you kind of have your center position and then your play space. And as you're walking, these are always kind of trying to bring you back to your center position. So just like the Infinideck, it's always just trying to keep you into the center of your play space. And that's what these do. So you're already pretty dang close to that reality.
Far future, maybe integrating these into some sort of like exoskeleton, would be the ultimate thing. And then
have fun with it, right?
Yeah, and then full dive comes along and it makes all these technologies obsolete. But hopefully not soon.
I think we got some time before that's a thing. So we're doing okay. Who's your target market for these shoes? Obviously, right now as a startup, they're kind of looking at the business avenues, but we're pretty soon already looking at a consumer market. It's anybody that really could find use out of these, I would say, but feel free to add some flavor to that if you'd like.
Both Ashley and I, our goal is consumers and gamers because we're gamers too. Like that's why we started doing this kind of stuff. Yeah, it's a bit easier this year to start with businesses because they can afford to pay a bit more and they can help us develop features and that sort of thing. And
well, it keeps the money coming in, right? And yeah, that makes a lot of sense. That's one thing I like about you, and that when I just feel it's nice when you see something like this and that your goal is gaming, because that's what I'm into. That's what I know people that watch my stuff are into. So it's obviously because you're so into that, you're just so passionate about making these work just the way that we all dream something like this could work, right? So I just think that that's very cool that you guys have that focus. So that is
Yeah,
awesome.
I mean, I want it to be, I want it to be the best it can be, not just for everybody else, but for me too.
Exactly.
because
Well, yeah,
I want to use them and just forget, everything and just go on.
it's
Yeah.
the best kind of motivation. That's the best kind of motivation. This is an interesting question, and this is our last one from Bill here. So, how do you think this technology will impact the VR industry?
Hopefully it gets more people to come into VR and maybe make it a little bit less niche and
Mhm.
yeah, make it more mainstream. You can drive down the price and make it work with standalone because then you don't need a PC to use them with. Hopefully it just makes it grow and makes it seem way more cool to people who are kind of on the fence about VR. You'll hear this about VR itself, but like VR is a gimmick, or some people might say the VR shoes are a gimmick and that sort of thing. But we want to make it good. We want to make it look so good that people are like, no way, I want to try that. I want to do that and that sort of thing.
You make it so good that people can't call it a gimmick, right? Like, I mean, and already my brain's there with stuff like this because I've been into VR locomotion for so long. I think that something like this and just the direction that you guys are talking about going is there's no matter what, you're going to have a big impact. So like, if I think, for fun, for a minute, for my sake, I'd love to see just stages where people are playing competitive games against each other and using something like this, right? And when you get to the point where, you can maybe more easily like kind of jump around and kind of be a little bit more agile on them, like something like that, that's an incredible scene to imagine. Just being more accessible in terms of space that they use up and just your ability to take them wherever you are. So, having standalone support, you could easily take these to a friend's house and then use them and show them to friends, or just again have them anywhere you want to play very immersive locomotive VR while getting kind of a workout. Thank you so much again, Alex, for having me over so that I could get a more private demo of these. I am incredibly excited for the future of the FreeAim shoes and for seeing kind of what the next versions are going to look like. Super happy that you had me over. Looking forward to maybe coming back down the road to try out some of the newer models. And thanks for answering some of the questions from my community. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for making the drive all the way over here. And yeah, we'll definitely keep in touch and come back over, or maybe I'll go over to you and that sort of thing. And we can talk about, getting you a pair, like a review pair or a beta tester pair, that sort of thing. So we'll talk about that.
I was going to wait to beg for that, but yes, I do appreciate that because I am incredibly excited for the potential of having a beta pair of these. But thanks again. Really appreciate it.
Yeah. Thank you.
Well, I hope you learned a bit more about these VR shoes that FreeAim is working on. I'm thrilled to get a pair of my own in the near future here, so make sure you guys subscribe so you can see all the new stuff that's happening with FreeAim as I learn it. I really believe what FreeAim is working on here is something very special, and it is really going to change the way that we look at VR locomotion as well as its accessibility. I also felt reassured by the fact that the people behind this company are gamers, most like you and me, and they want to make these the best possible experience for virtual reality gaming. If there's any questions you think we have not covered in this video, make sure you let us know what those are in the comments below. I am sure the FreeAim team will also be keeping an eye on those. And in general, I would love to hear what you think about the FreeAim shoes so far and what you think they could mean for the future of VR locomotion. Make sure you check out my streams where I go live on Twitch, TikTok, and YouTube, and we will see you on the virtual set.